Welcome to our October 360 presentation. I'm Curator of Education, Anna Smith, and today it's my pleasure to introduce artist Anna-Bella Papp. Anna-Bella Papp joins us today as part of the Nasher's Sightings series, which celebrates the work of young and emerging artists. Her sculptures, exhibited upstairs in our corner gallery, are quiet and thoughtful, a spare and elegant respite from the city street just beyond the gallery window. Working exclusively in unfired clay, Papp creates modestly sized works that may call to mind materials and realms outside themselves while still insisting on their own physical reality. Each object, laid flat on a tabletop, invites us to inspect closely, following delicate lines and forms that take on heightened significance against the fragile surface of the clay. Anna-Bella Papp attended the University of Art and Design in Cluj, Romania, and the prestigious artist residency program De Ateliers in Amsterdam. Her work has been exhibited in group shows at institutions including Kunsthalle Budapest in Hungary and Museum Tongerlies in the Netherlands. And in 2013, Papp was the subject of an exhibition by Stuart Shave Modern Art in London. Born in Romania and currently living and working in Rome, Papp's Sightings exhibition at the Nasher Sculpture Center is the first solo museum presentation of her work. Joining Papp in conversation today is Nasher Chief Curator Jed Morse, who was instrumental in bringing her work to Dallas and put together the exhibition upstairs along with the gorgeous essay that accompanies it. Please help me to give a warm welcome to them both, Jed Morse and Anna-Bella Papp.
Anna, thanks so much. It's wonderful to have you all here to help us celebrate the opening of Sightings, Anna-Bella Papp, AnnaBellas. Beautiful exhibition upstairs in the corner gallery. If you haven't had a chance to see it yet, don't worry. You'll have an opportunity after this conversation and can come back again. It runs through January 18th, so plenty of time to take it all in. One of the reasons why we are doing this exhibition is that, occasionally in the art world, you have an incredibly beguiling experience with a work of art, and you find it difficult to put words to it. And I had such an experience when I first encountered Anna-Bella's work. It was presented at an art fair in New York last year, and in an art fair, for those of you who have been, I mean, they're incredibly busy places, lots of people, lots of things to look at, lots of noise, and Anna-Bella's work seemed to clear space for itself. If you haven't been upstairs and seen it, most of her work would fit comfortably on the seat next to you. They're very modest in terms of their size, but at the same time, they are incredibly powerful and evocative forms. So the other thing about Anna-Bella's work is that it's all clay. And I wanted to start off by talking about your experience with clay and why the interest in focusing on this one particular material.
Okay. Well, first of all, welcome everyone, and we are glad to have you here. And I'm so profoundly grateful for the opportunity that was given to me to be part of this beautiful series of exhibitions at the Nasher. So, about the clay. Well, it's I think it's a very simple material, and it's just a basic thing to work with. There's no requirements of special surroundings or workshops. Everyone could just do it in their living room, as I do it, actually. Because I don't like to have a studio anymore. It's just more like, having a normal life and trying to also look at art and do something sometimes.
Yeah, and it's you say it's something that's kind of it's part of your normal life.
Yeah, I mean, I was introduced to clay very early on.
Yeah.
Actually, probably most people had at one point in their life experience with something soft from which you can model things with your hands, and it's a very intuitive thing probably kids are very fond of usually. So yeah, it was a thing that just came to me. I mean, I had some, at school we had these workshops when I was a ceramic department, and we were modeling things from clay. And after I finished that, actually, I never wanted to touch clay anymore, you know. But so I went to photography university, and I finished my degree there. And I was just, you know, so much looking forward to do something again with my hands, something that takes more than an instant, something which you can go back and forth and then have like an experience a photographer would have, like a temporary experience, but with an object and through that object. So I happened to have this clay around from the first school I had. I had to do some works there, and so we bought this clay from Hungary because we didn't have clay then in Romania and stuff like that. So it's not necessarily something people would do like with this kind of clay, unless they are like professionalizing artifacts, you know, for living, right, and things like that. So
yeah, you know, all of the, I mean, particularly a work like this, which is kind of a slab of clay that's thick at one end and then very gently slopes to the other end. There seems to be in a lot of the work a really kind of palpable physicality to it. I mean, even for, you know, someone who is just viewing the object, it has a kind of physiological impact, which is surprising because it's so kind of subtle and simple. I mean, is there, you know, for you in making these objects, is the physicality of making them part of the work of art as well, that you hope to impart to the viewer?
Well, yeah, I don't hope for anything. I mean, I don't have a message to, you know, tell or a story to tell. I mean, there are stories, but they are so personal, and it's about, you know, just living your life. And I'm happy if someone can have experience with my work, and it's probably not the same what I have, and because the pieces look so easy to be made, I think, and it's not really that. I mean, there's physicality, like physical work involved, and what you can see here, it's really much tells you how it was made. I mean, it's a very simple gesture, actually. But then, you know, clay is not a material like stone. I mean, it's always moving, and you always have to adjust yourself to it and to take control of it in a different way. I mean, it's not just taking away and then things stay perfect. So even like a very regular surface would take a lot of time, actually more time than something on which you can see the fingerprints and things like that.
Right, right. You know, these particular kinds of work where, you know, you take essentially a basic slab and maybe remove part of it and reposition it, they seem to be about just the kind of the volumetric quality of the material. You know, I love this piece because you think that the kind of upper portion of it is just the part that was cut out, but if you look very closely, it's actually thinner than.
Right. Yeah, I was surprised that you've noticed that. No, I remember you coming to my studio in Rome, and I was telling you that, you know, that part was just cut out and put into into a different position on the top of the piece. And you were like, but why is that? There's a difference between what's missing and what's there. And yeah, that's true. I mean, it looked bad, and so I had to adjust that thing. But it is from that part, which
Right.
which was cut out. It's just, you know, I touched it up a little bit. It was
Yeah.
necessary for my, I don't know, for my visual preference.
Right. Because it's a composition. It's not.
Yeah, first of all, yeah. I mean, it's a back and forth thing between, I mean, I really like the idea of actually just taking apart and putting it back.
Yeah.
But then, you know, it's just not how it happened.
Right. Yeah. You know, one of the things that we've that's commented on frequently about your work, and I probably, oh well, actually no, I'm not there yet. Let me talk about this. So, one of the things, you know, that's surprising is the kind of color palette of the work, because it's, you know, the range of colors, you know, it ranges from warmer, kind of ruddy browns, but then these very kind of pure grays and whites. And if you see, it's something that actually is a little bit surprising. You know, how do you see the role of color in the work?
Wow, it's a good question, because you know, different clays have different properties, and I have to take them as a whole, you know. And I don't know. I mean, I thought it wasn't so obvious that it has a color, but you know, people in Dallas seem to be noticing that so much. I mean, when I was in Amsterdam, they were always like, "Okay, it's just gray. You know, it's okay. But it's gray." And maybe because I wasn't really combining back then the clays between them. So I think that has a pictorial effect on it, and you can already read it as painterly, so you become aware of color. You know, at the beginning it was really monolithic, so it was just the same clay, and I really liked that integrity. But then I started to realize that by introducing color, it's just so much of a complexity opening up to it, and it's also something to experiment with. So there are differences in clay that one cannot really see in the composition of it, which is the grog or the absence of it. And that's like underneath the surface most of the time, and it's hard to see it. But with the color, yeah, I think it's just great, because there are all different things in it, different minerals, and they come from different parts of the world probably, and they mix it, they make it, prepare it as a colored thing, so it has to correspond to a standard they have, and they're always trying to have the same color when you're firing it. But of course we're not firing pieces, so it's in between. It's very muted colors, I think.
Yeah, and there's a kind of powderiness to the surface.
That too.
The you know, working, you know, you've restricted yourself to a particular material and a similar format in terms of these kind of rectangular forms. So it seems like each new work is kind of an experiment to see, you know, what kind of range of expression can be wrought from such a limited means.
It's about curiosity, I think. It's like doing it all over again, like starting it all over. But it's not a restriction. I mean, it came so natural with this format. Because, you know, the clay I had at home, I think you know this story, was about the same format. It was like twice as big, which was already too much for me to handle. I mean, I'm a lazy person. I like to just feel okay when I'm working, and I won't, you know. So I was I wasn't trying anything, actually it came, and I observed that, and I had this kind of predilection to go back to that thing. I did bigger, smaller, different, but because once you have sort of a repetition going on, things like changes become so important. Like very, very minimal variations can already be infused with so much meaning, which was very interesting for me to observe. And also the clay itself has its own life. I mean, when it dries, I'm leaving it, I'm finishing the piece, but the piece is not finished yet. So it takes like a new week or even more sometimes to become completed by itself. And that's something I'm not control of. I mean, it will shrink, it will curve, and it will change the color, and things happen around him, like mice come in and leave their footprints, and insects, and hair and dust. It's quite nice. I mean, it's always with like with the paintings now. I mean, I don't insist in that. I don't think that there's reason to talk about sculpture, painting, or painting sculptures, which is very in fashion nowadays. But still, there is this fragility to the surface, in which because it's so small, it almost lends itself to be viewed also as a representational thing. And then, but there's also the back and forth, much more, I think, perceivable than with a painting, because we know that paintings are objects as well, and especially, like modern periods, they had all these issues going on of not anymore considering painting just like a window to the painter's mind or something like that. But, it's so interesting to see that you can relate to things like, isn't it glamorous to find yourself in a situation when colors or objects look like in a painting, or the setting is like reminds you, and you would never thought that it's real, but it is. I mean, it can happen, and vice versa. When you see something in a painting and you like it, like it's a big, I don't know, golden sculpture, and you think, wow, I'd love to have that sculpture at home, but I cannot bring it in. I mean, it's too big. So you go with a painting, something like that.
Well, I mean, that goes to this notion of, people see in these, very modest works spaces that are on a grander scale, as it, like you would look at an architectural model. And and look at that smaller thing, but imagine it on a much larger scale. So I mean, that it's it's a little bit. We were talking about this at lunch earlier. That my particular experience of those things that that they do, at least to me, suggest much larger spaces. Is really my experience of them, and not necessarily yours.
No, I wasn't intending anything like that. But you're not the only one. I mean, this is something I cannot really escape. Being the one who's doing architectural models. But actually, it crossed my mind to become an architect, but I wanted to be so many things at some point. And it's not about that, but I can see that people growing up in Dallas or somewhere else, like in an active city where you are constructing things, you are like looking at architecture, you want to be part of your surroundings, to take care of everything, like even the landscape is designed and everything is so artistically done in a way. So you can kind of probably have this visual vocabulary that is superimposed onto the object. But that doesn't have to be my piece. It could be just whatever you happen to encounter, I mean, you have like a relationship with You know, can you imagine, you know, the light here is so pink. I think Dallas should wear pink. It's something so close, you know, something you grow up with.
No, absolutely. And I mean, I've always thought that there was an extraordinary quality to the light in Texas. But, you know, I had never really characterized it in terms of...
Of course, maybe you don't see it because it's so familiar.
Exactly.
So this is when people say that's an architectural model because they have that thing going on in their heads, you know, it's not really conscious.
Yeah.
Although I don't want to say that it's not. I mean, you know, it's fine if you can relate to it in whatever ways.
Yeah.
But you know, where I came from, it's not like this. People won't be thinking of building houses or things like that so much.
Yeah. Or even, you know, I mean, maybe not architectural spaces, but you know, there's a kind of landscape quality, and maybe that comes from you know, having this object laid on a table and then looking down over it.
Yeah, the bird's eye view.
Yeah.
Yeah, and also like going so close to something so tiny can let you, you know, be immersed in a kind of imaginary landscape or something like that.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's earthy. I mean, I can see that. I mean, it has something to do with places.
Yeah. You know, there's another work in the exhibition that also kind of reminds me of, you know, kind of a minimalist earthwork kind of. You know,
oh, I thought it was like a Baroque thing.
That kind of just gentle curve.
Yeah. Borromini. Yeah, it's.
Yeah, I mean, there's also
you say it as very, very minimal, but to me, this was almost exuberant.
Yeah. But this, you know, this is one of those things that really captures that sense of imagining a vastness while looking at something very small. So I wrote about these AnnaBellas works in the context of a couple of modernist predecessors. One is Isamu Noguchi, who conceived of an enormous earthwork that would have been made in the desert. But essentially, it was a sculpture to be viewed from Mars. So if you can imagine being on Mars and looking back at the Earth and having something on the face of the Earth so huge that you could see it like this, it gives you a sense of, you know, the kind of vastness of what that object would be like. At the same time, you know, this is a model that is a photograph of a model that he made of that object, and the model was something that you could easily put on a table.
Yeah, people tend to imagine my works as well as being something huge.
Yeah. But, you know, they are so intimate. And so the other thing that was brought to mind was this wonderful work of art from the Nasher's collection by Alberto Giacometti called No More Play, which is a tabletop object, and it's reminiscent of a kind of surrealist game board, but also, you know, a kind of a cratered landscape or a lunar landscape. And so you have both of those kind of suggestions. The intimate thing that you know, can touch and is on the table in front of you, and then the suggestion of something kind of imaginary and enormous. And so I think that was, you know, it's not that you're clearly not making objects to be viewed as models. You're making objects that are there in your space and to be experienced in your space.
Yeah, well, I think, you know, usually you don't see so many tables like in museums with people.
Yeah.
I mean, it could be a bit, you know, misleading. People won't expect to have such a one-to-one relationship with a piece of art. I mean, it's really, they show how vulnerable they are.
Yeah.
So they are somehow in your hands, and you have to take care of that, and that lends them, precious in a way. But it's not the preciousness that comes with the material. It's just the preciousness of a relationship you can have with it.
Yeah.
I like tabletops. I mean, it's the way I make the pieces, and I work on tables, and I think it's a good place to show them.
Yeah. So we have the works on a series of tables, and it's it is a very different way to install works of art in a museum. And so I think it's good for people to hear, why are these things on tables? Part of it is because that's kind of the way you work on them.
Yeah, and part of it because that's the way you can see them best, I
Yeah.
think. I mean, when you put it on a wall,
Yeah.
which I don't, oppose that. It's hard because of the fragility
Yeah.
of the material, first of all, and then it becomes like an image of itself, which some people like that,
Right.
and they want to have like things at a glimpse, and
Yeah.
not to mess around so much in space with tiny things.
Yeah. But it kind of reduces it to
Yeah,
an
I
image
think it
rather than
reduces
being
it. Yeah.
an object.
I mean, I always like when works change with the environment, and they change according to the space, to the light, and position, and everything, and also the combination between the pieces. If there is a group of pieces laid out, they can be so different. I mean, they change their meaning and the way they look, the way we look at them as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, I think what I like is when people wants to do something with them. I mean, they find a place where the work should stay.
Right.
When they accommodate them, and they think about that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because it's such a thing, you can move around.
Yeah.
You can put it in your suitcase and go with it to Paris.
Yeah. So, this idea that, this is an intimate thing that you can pick up and move around. The other thing that they're evocative of are books. And so, these kind of cuneiform tablets that are, engraved bits of clay. Your work is somewhat reminiscent of them because of the intimacy and the kind of handheld quality of them. But also, especially this work, which is also upstairs, has this kind of tracery pattern on it that's a bit like handwriting. Both,
like coded.
Yeah.
I think there is a relationship, like a visual relationship. And, I'm not so much interested in this cliche type of conversation about vocabulary and things like that, because, we've heard that before. But, I was surprised, actually, when people say, like, clay tablets. It never crossed my mind. And I was like, oh, yeah, that's cool. I mean, there are these 4,000-year-old clay tablets around, and Unfired and things like that. I was like, oh my God, this could be like a solution, because people were asking me if I want to fire the pieces to make them have a longer life, or a potentially longer life, because you never know. And I was always sort of opposing that because of the changes that occur in the material. And I found it so interesting to look at collections with the cuneiform clay tablets, and to find out that they are so busy now restoring them and firing them just to make them stay forever around.
Right.
And, it's interesting. I mean, if you think about it, like what do they expect, like floods and things like that? I mean, what? You think it's a museum is such a safe place, and
yeah. Well, and it's always interesting to have. Objects have their lives, their own lives, once they leave the artist studio, and then when they come to the museum, oftentimes, because museums are dedicated to preservation, it's almost as if museums exist to arrest the life of the object in some way.
Right. Wow. Yeah.
But also in thinking of it in a more positive way, extending the life of the object. I mean, I was shocked when you mentioned that some institutions are firing these unfired clay.
But you know what? There's no artist who can tell them not to do that.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just artifacts.
Yeah.
And of course, it's good because they are trying to find out what's written there, and they're rebuilding the history and what was there. It's an immense source of information. First of all, I think much more than a visual object to be experienced as a work of art.
Yes. Yeah. Absolutely.
So that could be, the reason why they don't consider the material as being so important.
Yeah, the concerns for an ancient artifact differ from concerns for a work of art. Yeah,
I think so.
This is such a lovely and incredibly subtle work of art, and it's this simple, very gentle kind of inflection of the surface ends up, even though it's so subtle and in some lights can be very difficult to see, as we discovered trying to light this at night. It looks fantastic during the day with the natural light coming in from the window, but it's really tough to light at night.
Yeah, it just disappears. Actually.
Yeah. So that very kind of subtle inflection of the surface is still so incredibly evocative. I mean, so little has been done to that slab of clay, but yet, I mean, you just have a kind of a series of ridges, and they recall folds in drapery or waves on a pond, and then
clay.
they're just marks, simple marks in clay.
Yeah, but I think it looks also just like clay sometimes.
Yeah,
it's not necessary. You don't necessarily have to think out all of these things, draperies and ancient art.
Yeah.
I think we've thought about. We were talking about my big, predecessors. This Masaccio and things like that.
Yeah.
And where, if you look at the left corner there, it's so much like my work.
Yeah. Well, so the sense that it's evocative. It's incredibly subtle and evocative of so many things that are also ephemeral.
Yeah.
And there's a sense of kind of
movement,
capturing in a very material way something that is very ephemeral.
Yeah, that's interesting. I never thought about that.
But when we talked about this Masaccio as being kind of a key touchstone in terms of...
Yeah, I mean, he was around. I had these reproductions when I started, and it was very much similar to what I did this piece just after he left, and I was, thinking back of, how it began, and I liked it. And I had some pieces that does not exist anymore, and they were like caves or, just water again. It was very different. Like a wavy water, but with individual waves.
Oh, yeah.
And it was also like rocky things. And yeah. I like that ambiguity. And also, I mean, it's not really ambiguous. I mean, it depends on the place where you put it. Because, that thing, the sea in this Masaccio could be a drapery just in the foreground. But it's there
Right.
where the sea has to be.
That's right. It's within the context of
Yeah.
the rest of the
Yeah, so I think
trees.
that the works, my work, have no surrounding to attached to them to tell you what they are.
Yeah. The other touchstone that we've talked about a lot for kind of representing or in some kind of tangible material way something that is impossible.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it is possible. I mean, there's symbolism recurrent throughout art history of, waves of light or either lines or wavy things and stuff like that. I was always amazed about that. Or like allegorical figures or just the soul of someone, appearing in a picture or even sculpture or whatever, like deny the personification of things like that.
Yeah.
We have this beautiful Mayol, the things are so, we like to give them form.
Yeah.
I mean, human creation knows no formlessness.
Yeah.
I think you always have to do something somehow, and it can only become something if it has a form. And
Right.
And then these are accepted. Although I think it was a mistranslation or interpretation of the ancient saint scripture about Moses and the rays of light that afterwards transform into horns and they become like that's Moses if it has horns.
Yeah.
But he was with me when I started to go to art school. I mean, we had these plaster molds of his head. And it was, I know him so well, although the molds were not so well done. I mean, it was much more angular.
Yeah.
And I was just so overwhelmed when I went to visit him in person.
I remember you telling me that, you had this plaster cast of the head of Michelangelo's Moses sculpture, and that you spent an entire year.
Oh, years, because we had no model.
Right. No. Yeah.
Well, after that there was a cleaning lady, but before we had Moses and Laocoon. So these were the two guys.
But drawing it,
sculpting it, parts of it, the entire face. Even bigger compositions, with fruits and vegetables and Moses.
Right. Yeah.
And draperies and all that. We had this small selection of objects we've used, and it was quite effective, I think.
Yeah.
Although I'm not sure.
But it wasn't until you moved to Rome that you actually
and the interesting thing about him actually now, after I was so much obsessed about representation of light, without a light source, but without becoming like just an abstract thing, and still without being like a torch or a candle or an image of a torch or a candle, because that's also so...
Just a symbol.
Yeah. It's so empty, I think. It has nothing from the liveliness of the things, how they behave in reality. And also, I think in painting you have a broader range of representing thing and of giving it to it an illusionist effect somehow.
Yeah.
But with sculpture it's not so easy. But what was interesting is that Michelangelo had worked on it for so long and he interrupted his work so much. And he did different things in Florence and it was back and forth. This ensemble of sculptures, which was designed and thought out by him, suddenly started to shrink as he advanced in the age. And before he finished it. It was like an Egyptian statue, like really straight and like a god, you know, having nothing human. And he decided to turn his head and also his one of his feet as if he was looking at the window in the church. So it was really specific to the space, and it's so alive when it's there. I mean, there's no better place for it. But it's so interesting how he mastered, you know, the material to do that, and how can you just switch like the degrees at such a big extent. And it's marble. I mean, I understand if someone does it in clay.
Right, yeah. But it's really kind of extraordinary to imagine changing the composition so late in a medium that is subtractive, where you can only take things away from it.
Right.
Yeah. And then, we know one of the other aspects, you're not working in marble, you're working with unfired clay, and there's an inherent fragility to the material. Right. But that fragility plays kind of an active role in the art object itself. This is a wonderful piece, and it's difficult to see from any photograph of it, but there is a space between the kind of top layer that has these curved elements carved into it, and then the base of the block. So about a quarter of an inch, half an inch of space in between those two elements. And when it's seen from the side, it looks quite thick, quite massive. And then when you see it from the top, that it really just it kind of does away with this notion of mass because it's been kind of cleared out inside. When I first saw images of this thing, I had it totally wrong.
I can imagine that. I mean, it's impossible to take photographs of it, and it's impossible to. I mean, it's not impossible, but it's hard. I mean, you really have to look for that thing. Yeah. It's not a thing you notice at first sight. Yeah. The top layer is suspended, and it's just kept there by these kind of thin walls surrounding the thing.
Is the inherent fragility of the object something that is it kind of lends itself or plays a part in the understanding or the meaning of the object?
Well, I think so. I mean, I'd like, I think it has the fragility of a thought, of an idea, more of a being an object, because we've seen so many things going on also with digital things, and they have no form or anything. So I think it's not a far-fetched idea to aim at something that has no substance in reality. So I think it's more of a thing that happened in your head, I think, than the object itself.
So kind of the concept of...
Yeah, and there was this thing, it's a very religious idea, I'm not so much into that, but they said about, the homo faber, the person who's so creative is almost becoming like a sort of a god, because only God and the artists are able to create. And actually women as well, because they can give birth to children, which is, I think, the ultimate way of creation. But so about artists and doing things, and how through their sensibility and the beauty of the object, you can access like the beauty of the soul, which goes sort of hand in hand, but it's very much separated. I mean, the object has no soul.
Right.
No, I mean, you have to...
You endow it with meaning.
Yeah. Because otherwise it's just,
a thing. There's always been an element of, I don't know if you call it representation or figuration, because it's kind of hard to pin down. But there are at times recognizable things in the work.
Yeah.
And a lot of times, and I think, it seems like, more recently, a lot of those references to actual things seem to come from kind of the ancient past, particularly within the Mediterranean. And,
Well, because I'm in Italy.
yeah. Living in Rome
it's
has
all
an
around.
effect.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I embrace that, and sometimes I like things. I just like to keep them with me, and hoping for a change. If there's a thing I admire, then I will probably have a reproduction of it, and I will look at it because waiting to take effect on my subconscious and be able to create something else. But about figuration with this particular piece, I don't know. Yes, I do recognize things, but the thing is that I don't know what they mean because it's a coded thing.
Yeah.
It's an ancient clay tablet, or no, it's not. It's like a medallion.
Yeah.
About which Werner Herzog, in one of his documentaries, it was a documentary it's an early documentary about Carlo Gesualdo, the Italian inventor and precursor of the madrigal. Very beautiful and painful songs, very spiritual. And, he's had controversial life, this killing his family and stuff like that. So that's an object which now it's in pieces, but it's an entire round-shaped thing. I think I've showed it to you.
Yeah.
I think it's terracotta.
Yeah.
And it's a tiny thing. So Werner Herzog was obsessed by it, and he says in the documentary that it was the obsession of Carlo Gesualdo, of which he had dreams and couldn't sleep at night trying to decipher what was there.
Yeah.
And interestingly, I had some dreams with the object, and I just didn't like to be so close to Carlo Gesualdo. And I wanted to escape, and it's like a dream.
Yeah.
I was dreaming with that piece, like being in, like falling and breaking and flood and stuff like that.
Yeah. And
so I don't know what's there. I mean, I was a bit, scared because you don't know, like they're haunted objects from the past. They discover in found somewhere in Middle East, and then the people get these diseases and they die.
Yeah.
It's interesting, I think.
Yeah.
To use it, and it's representational, but
but I think
it has no immediate meaning.
Yeah, but I think that's oftentimes, the kind of mystery of the object. Even though it's recognizable, in almost all of the works where there are recognizable objects, they're presented in a way that is evocative and mysterious, and it's not just kind of, yes, this is a Polaster, this is a Polaster that seems to be engraved into something as if it's being excavated from the ground. I mean, that's the way I looked at it, but, again, this is as much kind of a mysterious symbol as any of the other things on that medallion.
Yeah, well, the point wasn't the column itself. I mean, it was the position of it. It's a quite playful thing, I think, because it feels like it's suspended somehow. This you see that little edge there. Just it stays, but it's also almost like in a movement. And, I had no real intentions. I mean, I was just playing, and it was just nice to do something so precise. I think I like that.
Yeah, these really clean lines.
Really took my time on it. And you see these columns in Rome, they are everywhere. And they like to place these artifacts in really little fragments, and they combine them, and they put them on walls, and they put them here and there, and it's like you're showing off what they have, and typically in the best places you will have more of these things. Not only in museums, in private houses as well, and in hotels and everywhere. And I just found it so, because they deal with it. I mean, it was there, and then they moved it, and they moved it again. I mean, just to various places. I mean, people used to donate like stone from their house to build a church, and they were just giving their stairway to the church to do the altarpiece out of it, something like that. I found it so interesting. I mean, because the material persists and the meaning of it changes completely.
Yeah.
Because, I also like this cyclicity of the material that you can, if you wanted to, use it again.
Yeah.
And
That's nice. That's a fascinating idea, and one that I think we've forgotten about. But it's the kind of thing that that lives on in Rome, because Rome is constantly kind of living with its past
they're
in
proud
a very
of it.
active way.
Yeah, well, what else? I mean, that's what they have.
Yeah.
They don't do so many things right now. It's not the best situation for them to renew their cities.
Yeah. So this work actually has a title. Almost all of AnnaBella's works are untitled. This one is called "Occasionally a Ripe Apricot Fell from a Tree," and
Fell to the ground.
Fell to the ground. Sorry, yes, fell to the ground.
From a tree.
From a tree. Well, it had to fall from somewhere.
Yeah.
This, without any kind of additional information about where this particular phrase came from, looking at it, it seemed to be kind of evocative and poetic, and the imagery of on this particular work is of this kind of mosaic pattern of stones, or in this case, grog, the kind of.
Yeah, I took my time to filter the clay, because I was extracting manually. Then, I thought, it's taking so much time.
So you
and
actually extracted the grog from the clay?
Yeah, sure.
Wow.
And I put it back in a different order.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, it was really zen.
Yeah. But it's reminiscent of ancient mosaics, and it just the title, "Occasionally a Ripe Apricot Fell to the Ground," just seemed evocative of this kind of halcyon existence in an ancient Roman villa. But you actually for you it's evocative of your the work of an artist, your work.
Yeah, well, I kind of like the life, actually the sentences from a book. It's a Hungarian writer, Peter Nadas, or how do you say it in English? And he wrote this book like for 18 years. Like he's living in a farmhouse somewhere in rural Hungary. And it's just amazing. I mean, it's a very complex book.
Yeah.
It's not something I would write, and it has nothing to do with my work, of course, but I thought about this, the destiny of an artist, or the place of an artist, and how do you live your life? And there's this romantic idea, which kind of works. I think it's good to be alone. And what you probably see much more often is this community-like artists, parties, and stuff like that. But it's the titles of my work, and they are like general things, most of them. If it's like a sentence like this, it could apply to whichever work. I mean, it's not really a thing. It's like an addition,
Yeah.
It's not the thing. It's not describing the thing necessarily. Though I had some very descriptive titles, and then I have some very, things I write out into my sketchbook. It's a sketchbook of words. It's mostly things I just hear or read about. Not so much of little clay tablets, It's just broad ideas of how things go, how life is. I think it's just, I'm just learning, figuring out. But the way you described it, it's very cinematic and much more theatrical than I would thought it will become.
Yeah. What, often the works, well, I won't say often, occasionally the works, engage, both sides of the object, the edges, like in this work. What was the interest in continuing that kind of mosaic pattern around?
I know, it just looks good.
Yeah.
I mean, I was surprised because I thought, I shouldn't just draw like a square on top of a square or something. So, I don't know, it came, and then, mosaics are sometimes they're just covering all these surfaces, and they're illusory sometimes, so you don't know where things end, and you're kind of lost. You're standing on a landscape or something, which is a mosaic, actually.
Yeah.
It's just inverse perspectives and all that thing is just very interesting.
Yeah.
But again, when I worked on this, I was more of a watchmaker, a jeweler, because it was so tiny. I wasn't really stepping back, to see it from a distance. It was very relaxing.
Yeah. The image is reminiscent.
That's clever.
Of a number of kind of ancient mosaics of animals.
Yeah.
This is one from Cyprus.
Really?
Yeah.
No, just to avoid misunderstanding. I wasn't working after this. I was working after a Greek vase.
Yeah.
And there was a woman. It was like a figure, like an allegorical figure, sitting on top of the cat, or what panther, or what was it? It was a different animal. I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, it wasn't as chunky as this.
Yeah.
It was painted. It was very, very, very nice and detailed. And elongated and beautiful.
Yeah.
But it was the same position. It looks like it's the best way to see all the four legs of an animal, and the tail just in the air, and it's also like between air and earth somehow.
Yeah.
Just.
Yeah. Where was the Greek face that you?
I don't know. It's from Google.
Oh yeah. Well, there you go. Strange. That's how I found this image.
You see? You see? And this is also really interesting. Do you use Google Images?
Yeah.
Then you can find all, wow.
Yeah, I mean,
So
you put
many
in
things
almost any
come.
search term, and you come up with.
When you upload an image and you find similar things, you will be surprised how many things very unsimilar come there.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. But this is of course is the old art historical game. Finding the source of the image.
I like that.
And it's I mean it's fun, but oftentimes, it can be totally misleading.
Yeah,
because,
no, it's...
Because even though you're matching images, you could be totally wrong about it, you know?
Yeah, and I mean, what's the point of it?
Right.
Of finding out I mean, I've seen so many things like that. I mean, people are dedicating like blogs, if you know, searching out.
Yeah.
Especially contemporary artists, like,
Yeah.
where did they
Yeah.
found that thing?
But I think there's something interesting in that game, especially when, you know, you find imagery that you maybe didn't seek out, and in something that has existed and been done over and over and over again, about the persistence of images and the persistence of their importance. The last work I wanted to talk about was this sculpture upstairs that where, you know, it seems to be like some of the ones I showed at the beginning, just kind of this kind of simple form, exploring this sense of mass, the shift in mass, but also the texture that differentiates the form from the slab underneath it. And it's you know, it's a simple geometric form, but it's still, depending on how you look at it, incredibly evocative.
Yeah.
And you can see it as so many different things. So I kind of don't want to show the next slide because I don't want to influence anybody. But you know, if you look at it one way.
You go ahead. I'm curious.
No. We'll make them go look at it upstairs. So, but if you look at it in one particular way, you can see this. You know, you can see that form as essentially perspectival lines kind of receding into the distance. And so you have this tension between the materiality of the object and the pictorial quality of that.
Yeah, you know what? I think it looks like, you know, these objects in churches taken over by some Protestant group of people. You know, they were like erasing faces and.
Right.
When the revolution came.
Yeah.
I think it looks like that. No, I was interested in surpassing or not using the matrix of the work, like having something to start with. No, it's not in the air. So there will always be this foreground, background thing and variations, and then at one point that's a background, you know, that delimitates the piece, which is actually not necessarily a background, but you know,
right.
I was interested in that, like how do you perceive that kind of thing being finished, like being cut?
Yeah.
When you see it where you have still a lot of space to go. I mean, you could have just made those lines meet in infinity, you know, and have
kind of
like
to the edge of
a real like triangular thing going on.
Yeah.
But because I could have go there, but then you know the other edges, or where do they go? I mean, there's no place for them.
Yeah. So you know, the perceptual aspect was something that was of interest, because I mean, it's also, I mean, you can read it as a pyramid, like you know, an ancient.
Yeah, that too. I mean, I like you know, archaic stuff, and I was looking at the catalog. You know, it looks so exotic. I like that.
Yeah.
I wasn't expecting it. So.
But you know, it seems like a lot of your work kind of deals, and even this work kind of goes back to, say, the you know, the untitled work with that's like folds of drapery, that very simple kind of movement of the material.
Yeah.
That, you know, it's the, you know, you have this kind of aspect of the perceptual experience of that object, which is difficult to pin down. I mean, you can't, every time you try and make something kind of concrete in your mind out of it, you know, it contradicts itself. And or it presents a contradiction so that you can't say definitively what it is.
No, you have not. You must not. I mean, you know, I kind of forget how I arrived there most of the time, and I really enjoy, you know, seeing it anew and just thinking about it and you know, looking at something which is so foreign but so familiar in the same time.
Yeah.
And you know, it's just pieces of clay. I mean, how could I possibly give a definition of what you should look at and why? Especially because we are so different and we come from different backgrounds, and there's this discourses going on, you know, the Western type of art historian, and you know, you have the East where things weren't like that, and they don't really appreciate or don't understand, they don't have knowledge and the key to what's going on elsewhere.
Yeah.
Well, I think
So
it depends.
you prefer something that doesn't kind of give itself away. So.
I don't prefer, but that's what we have.
Well, great. Well, we look forward to you making more slabs of clay.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Are evocative and mysterious. So thank you very much for bringing your work here and also for letting us hear from you today.
Sure, it was such a pleasure being here. I really enjoyed it. It was so fun.
Great.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, thank you.